Okay, hello, my friends. It is Wednesday, November 20th, 2024. I have 7 big stories for you today. So, we've talked about sanctions and sanctions not really working because some countries go around them. Like Europe will send it to one of the stans, Kazakhstan, or one of those countries, and then it'll be sent to Russia from there. So, here, this is Mikhail Khodorkovsky, and he's an opposition leader. He said Putin found a backdoor for banned AI chips through India's pharmaceutical industry. Who would have thought? The numbers are staggering: 300 million in restricted servers, 1,100 units, and a network of companies designed to bypass Western sanctions. Now, how has this worked exactly? Well, these servers are restricted under US and EU sanctions targeting military tech, but they get around it because India is not part of that process. So how do they pull this off? India is not a party to Western sanctions against Russia, and these servers are valued at 300 million, highlighting the scale of the trade. India has become a key hub for re-export of restricted technology to Russia, second only to China. Malaysia often serves as the origin for these products, further complicating the enforcement efforts by Western nations. Now, NVIDIA chips are these servers optimized for AI and are restricted due to a list of their potential use in Russian military industrial complex. These components could power electronic warfare or intelligence systems. Now, the US and EU officials have urged India to stop these shipments, but India just replies that we're not part of this. These are our laws. It doesn't apply to what's going on with Russia. So, okay, but you can't talk about we're all about peace and then do this simultaneously. And they know that they're all about the money, and that's what they're doing. They're chasing the dollars. Okay, big story number 2. Defending Biden's too little, too late Ukraine policy without bending facts proves a difficult task for Jake Sullivan. So here's the article in the Kyiv Post. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, in a recent interview with the major broadcaster PBS, argued that the Biden administration legacy on Ukraine will be one of smart geopolitics and vigorous and effective American support of Ukrainian independence and democracy. I don't think it's going to work out quite like Sullivan is hoping. I think he's going to have a checkered legacy at best. He said his points included this: the U.S. is not directly participating in Ukraine's defensive war against Russia because the U.S. is providing Ukraine's weapons and money, but not sending fighting men. Technically, that's true. Only technically, it's using some of our material, but okay. The U.S. gave Ukraine F-16 fighter jets. We, the U.S., have provided F-16s to Ukraine. That's false. We've allowed other countries to use that technology and provide it to Ukraine. Sullivan was responding to a question about whether the U.S. had done enough to help Ukrainians stop Russian advances. Well, that one's highly debatable. Whether they've done enough, I don't think so. Okay, although Ukraine's military manpower shortages are real, Sullivan's argument that insufficient troops lie at the heart of Ukraine's defensive weakness, and there is a problem with that, that flies in the face of actual combat experience. In this particular war, in the Russo-Ukrainian war, first and foremost, the weight of firepower wins the battles, and they have been outgunned repeatedly over the course of the war. U.S. deliveries of key weaponry have been adequate, he says, but that's simply not true. And the article goes on and on. I'll just show you just a little bit more. The Biden administration can take credit for preventing Russian defeat of Ukraine in the early days of the war. Quote, "We are able to stand up and push back against Russian aggression in Ukraine to keep Kyiv from falling. Kyiv stands." Although the verdict on that will be left to historians, almost anyone who was in Kyiv at the time would say that the argument that the Russian army did not capture Kyiv thanks to Biden is demonstrably false. The first major U.S. weapons deliveries arrived in Ukraine only in mid-May, thanks to the bravery of the Ukrainian people, but also thanks to Joe Biden rallying countries around the world. We defended Kyiv, we defended Ukraine. Well, okay, so Biden did do some of these things, and we'll give credit where credit's due. I think Boris Johnson was by far the leader in the early days, but Biden did do this thing, and I'll give him proper credit for that. But it's been fairly tepid since. It's been, let's trickle things in rather than give you all that you need to survive. And here's another example. Landmines. Can't do landmines. Landmines are immoral. We can't use them. But Biden just authorized sending anti-personnel landmines to Ukraine, reversing a prior policy. Why? U.S. officials cite the need to counter Russia's mass troop attacks in the east, and Ukraine is pledging to avoid the use in populated areas. But they would have avoided the use in populated areas before. Why wait until you've allowed so many Ukrainians to die as a consequence of this policy? Yes, landmines could hurt civilians later on, but they have to win the war. Okay. Now, Zelensky was in a Fox News interview. He said, if they will cut, I think we will lose. Like, if the U.S. cuts off Ukraine, I think we will lose. Zelensky tells Fox News on U.S. aid, quote, of course, anyway, we will stay and we will fight. We will have production, but it's not enough to prevail. Okay, so what's he talking about here? Well, if you understand this, U.S. leadership remains crucial. This is Euromaidan Press, not only because it provides 52% of military aid, but also due to its global leadership role. I mean, you take that out, you take the U.S. out of the equation, and there becomes a kind of a leadership vacuum that can be filled, but will it be filled? It could provide a lot of chaos in the meantime. Despite Trump's claims that military aid to Ukraine is a waste of money, he may support Ukraine to avoid comparisons to Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan. I think that's very fair. He does not want that to be the case. Now, this was also interesting as well. This interviewee is saying that Trump supported Biden's decision to grant permission to Ukraine to deep strike in Russia. This is the president of the Republican Club, Boris Pincus, talking, and he said Biden shared his plan and discussed it with Trump. Now, I guess that's when they met at the White House. It could have been over the phone, I don't know, and got a positive response. In Trump's politics, the peace is based on force. Now, the comment here was, can you imagine if Trump allows Ukraine to win the war, which is a positive thing, but the Democrat Party will need to go through a lot of introspection about just, the support for Biden and that sort of thing. And look, Biden was doing something, but he just wasn't doing enough. Okay, this is Lindsey Graham, Republican U.S. Senator. Graham saying, the richest country in all of Europe for rare earth minerals is Ukraine. Listen to this argument. And now, he is a war hawk. He's a little out of step with the MAGA crowd, but just listen to him make his argument.
Still standing. This war is about money. People don't talk much about it. But the richest country in all of Europe for rare earth minerals is Ukraine. $2 to $7 trillion worth of minerals that are rare earth minerals, very relevant to the 21st century. Ukraine's ready to do a deal with us, not the Russians. So it's in our interest to make sure that Russia doesn't take over the place. It's the breadbasket of really the developing world. 50% of all the food going to Africa comes out of Ukraine. We can make money and have an economic relationship with Ukraine that'd be very beneficial to us with peace. So
Now, this is the conclusion of why he was saying what he's saying.
Trump's going to do a deal to get our money back, to enrich ourselves with rare earth minerals, a good deal for Ukraine and us, and he's going to bring peace. And Biden's been a disaster when it comes to...
And he just had to poke Biden in the eye because that's what partisans do on either side of the equation. But that gives me hope, the way that he's thinking, that it might actually break toward Ukraine in a positive, meaningful way. Okay. Putin is open to a ceasefire if Trump brokers a deal, but rejects returning occupied territories or Ukraine's NATO ambitions. Well, what does Ukraine get other than that? That doesn't make any sense. Kremlin sources suggest willingness to freeze the conflict along current front lines. Sure, but not doing anything else? What does Ukraine actually get out of that deal? Okay, let's look at this. Big story number 3. So we know that these two lines were cut in the Baltic, and official information about the Chinese ship Yipeng 3 was allegedly in the areas of both cable damages. Okay, this is Anton Gerashenko, and we see this again in Nexta, and this is a Financial Times article, I think. Sweden is investigating the possible involvement of the Chinese vessel Yipeng 3. And there's more to it, though. So wait a minute. Why are the Chinese doing this? Well, it's a Chinese vessel, but wait, there's more. The Chinese bulk carrier Yipeng 3 has fully stopped in the Kattegat Bay. Danish patrol ship HDMS Sullivan is next to it. Listen to this. The skipper of the Chinese ship is a Russian national, and the route leads from Russia to Egypt. So, where there's smoke, there's fire. I can't say that this is definitively showing that this is what they did with this hybrid warfare attack on Europeans, but the circumstantial evidence is starting to pile up. Too quick to make a decisive judgment, but it looks like it could have very well been Russia. Darth Putin, the parody site, says your leaders called them Russian hybrid attacks because if they called them Russian attacks, they might have to do something about them. It's a good point. Okay, big story number 4. We see the first use of a storm shadow in Russia. So a drone captured the moments of Ukrainian missiles reportedly storm shadow landing at a Russian communications hub in the Kursk region. So all that wasn't there just a little bit ago. Here it was before that. Okay, now the French, for their part, are okay with a scalp as well. The French position on the use of long-range weapons currently does not require clarification. At the same time, France is confident that the entire arsenal of missiles provided to its Ukrainian partners is being used appropriately. Okay, how about the German tourists? Nope. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has said that for many reasons he considers the possible transfer of Taurus cruise missiles to Kyiv a mistake and that he still does not intend to supply them. Quote, I decided a very long time ago that the delivery of cruise missiles would, in my view, be a mistake. Now, in his defense, if he was just a peacenik after, World War II, if he just said, you know what, we'll be the humanitarian guys, that would have been okay. But it's not for that reason. It's like he's just repeating Russia's talking points about this. There would be no other option but the choice of targets. In turn, this would mean involvement in the conflict, which I do not consider correct. And that's what Putin was saying. Okay. Lavrov agrees with Scholz. Lavrov commented on the Ukrainian strike with ATACMS missiles and thanked Scholz. Quote, the strikes against Bryansk region with ATACMS missiles are a signal that the West wants escalation, Lavrov said. He mispronounced the word justice and it sounded like escalation. Lavrov also thanked Scholz for the fact that Germany does not transfer long-range Taurus missiles to Ukraine and prohibits strikes on Russia, calling it a responsible position. Well, if Lavrov is agreeing with you and calling that a responsible position, that's probably what you need to know about whether it is actually a responsible position. Robin Brook says growing up in Germany in the 1980s, we would study the Holocaust over and over in school with the mantra, never again, being the key lesson. I don't recognize Germany under its current leadership. It is deeply wrong and has forgotten the lessons of its recent history. There might be something to that. Okay, meanwhile, let's turn our attention now to the next big story, which is about the Russian economy. And there's a number of pieces to this. So, for example, real estate market is collapsing in Russia. New construction and apartment sales, it's down in pretty much every major city. And then despite the Russian central bank raising interest rates to levels not seen since the 1990s, Russian inflation continues higher as an average weekly grocery expenditures rise over 28% year over year. So the way that this is supposed to work is when you increase the interest rate, it's supposed to have some kind of effect on inflation, tamping that down. But it's not working, and that's problematic. Okay, Jay in Kyiv says inflation's out of control with a median salary of 34,200 rubles per month. Russians now have an average weekly grocery spend of 8,889 rubles. So that's up by 28% this year. So what does that mean? It means they're spending a quarter of their entire monthly income on groceries. And if you were to compare that, so I just Googled that, how much does the average American spend on groceries per month? And it said between 2022 and 2023, it was 11.2%. Let's assume it's higher than that. And if you look at this World Economic Forum chart, historically, United States, now this was 2016, I believe. United States at 6%, Singapore at 6%, United Kingdom at 8.2%, Switzerland at 8.7%, Canada at 9.1%, Ireland at 9.6%, Australia and Austria at 9.8% and 9%. That's kind of where you should be striving for, not at 25%. But Russians, they do kind of pride themselves on being able to absorb punishment. Now, this is Ryan Macbeth talking about a very MAGA commentator, Charlie Kirk, and his reckless stance on Ukraine, which will embolden China and ultimately kill Americans. As conservative as I am, I'm very much aligned with Ryan Macbeth's view. This is the way that you should be thinking about it.
A war with China in one easy tweet. Political commentator Charlie Kirk put out a letter to Russia saying he only wants peace. I'm at a NATO conference in Brussels right now, and one of the things I've learned is that if we do not support Ukraine, we will be fighting China in 2 or 3 years. China intends to invade Taiwan in October 2027 or April of 2028. China is actively destroying American manufacturing jobs. They are putting deadly chemicals on our street, and they think we are weak. If we don't support Ukraine, they will think we are even weaker, and they will take that as a green light that they can invade Taiwan in 2027 or 2028, and we won't do anything about it. The fact is that arming Ukraine now with weapons, not even soldiers, just weapons, puts America first, because ultimately it will deter China, and that will save American lives.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with him more. That's exactly right. I think that Putin would not have invaded Ukraine if he thought that the West was strong enough to stop him, and he didn't. Okay, last little bit. This morning I was showing you Jake Bro's fundraiser about 9 o'clock this morning when I recorded. So we're going to update right now in real time. It's 446,000 when I showed you this morning. And let's see what it's up to right now. $493,000. And that's, I mean, you're going to be at $500,000 by the end of the day today. That is absolutely wild that it's going that fast. This is day 2 or 3. I think it's day 3 yet uh, of this fundraiser. And I'll put the link below so that you can find the fundraiser if you want to participate. Finally, Darth Putin, the parody site again on this day in 2004, Chancellor Gerhard Schroeder said of Prez, "I thoroughly convinced that the Russian president wants to transform Russia into a democracy and that he's doing so out of deeply held conviction." A statement that has stood both the test of time and a special military operation. Well, he got it wrong. Like, there were signs that Putin was wanting to move this direction, but ultimately, I don't think he really wanted to move that direction. I think he wanted to look like he was moving that direction and still keep all the goodies for himself. Tell me what you think about that. Am I wrong? Put it in the comments below. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.